This video will cover dplyr verbs for creating and changing variables. The code used in this video is available in the Learning Management System. It will use the data file weather2017.rds. You should download them now if you'd like to follow along. By the end of this video, you should know what dplyr verb you can use to change the name of a variable, and also how to use a dplyr verb to create or change the content of variables in your tibbles. Up to this point, we've covered dplyr verbs for creating subsets of your data. Many data wrangling tasks, however, involve things like using your existing data to compute new information or altering existing data. dplyr provides two very important commands for these tasks. The first is rename, which you'll use to rename existing variables, and the second is mutate, which you'll use to create new or change existing variables. We'll start by taking a look at the rename verb. You use this verb to rename existing variables. The way it works is you'll pipe your data to the rename verb. You specify arguments in the form of the new variable name equal to the old variable name. You can rename as many variables as you'd like in a single rename verb. You specify new name, old name pairs separated by commas. When you're writing out your own code, it's best to put each of those new name, old name pairs on their own line. We can take a look at this in R. First, I'm going to run my setup code and load the weather2017.rds data file. Now that I've done that, let's rename some of the variables in that tibble. So if you remember, this tibble contains variables named maximum.tempf, minimum.tempf, and average.tempf. Suppose I'd like to change these to more compact names: min.tempf, max.tempf, and average.tempf. I can do that with the rename verb. So what I do is I take my weather tibble, I pipe it to the rename verb, and then I specify new name equals old name pairs separated by commas. Again, it's a best practice to put each one of these on a separate line to make your code more readable. Let's run that code. Again, I save this output to the weather tibble, so that overwrites my old data. Nothing prints out to the console. If I'd like to look at it, I can use the print function. As you can see, my resulting tibble now has new variable names min.tempf, max.tempf, and av.tempf. A second useful dplyr verb is the mutate verb. It creates or changes existing variables. The way it does this is it's going to construct values that can be functions of other variables in that observation. Like rename, a single mutate statement can create many new variables with statements separated by commas. So the way that you're going to specify this verb, again, you'll pipe data to a mutate verb, you'll specify a variable name, an equal sign, and then an R expression. Again, you can do this many times, separating variable name and expression pairs by commas. It's a best practice to put these pairs one to a line. So what is this expression? The expression component of a mutate verb can be any valid R expression. The expressions accept variable names from your tibble and will substitute the values for the corresponding observation in each calculation. It then evaluates the expression for every observation and saves that result in the variable name that you specified. If the variable name you specify is identical to a name that already exists in your tibble, that column will be overwritten with the new values. Before we use mutate in R, let's just work through an example of conceptually what is happening. So you can think of something similar to the data that we've loaded in R already, where you have some weather data. There's a date column, a minimum temperature, and a maximum temperature column. Suppose you'd like to compute the daily change in temperature, the difference between the high and the low temperature. How would you do that? Mathematically, you would just compute the change as the difference between the maximum temperature and the minimum temperature. We can do this using a mutate verb in R. So what I have here in my sample code, I take the weather tibble, I pipe it to the mutate verb, I specify change f as the variable that I'd like to create, and then I say it's equal to this expression of max.tempf minus min.tempf. R is going to substitute values for these named variables corresponding to the correct value for each observation, and then evaluate the expression for each observation, putting that value in the column change f. So again, what will happen? A new column will be created, change f. The first value here would be 51.8 minus 33.8, then 42.8 minus 37.4, then 44.6 minus 41. This would be your resulting data set with the value of change f computed. Remember, R is going to store this result in the named variable. It's going to create a new variable unless the variable name exactly matches a variable that already exists in your data, in which case it's going to overwrite that column with new values. So here I have the same example of using mutate in R. Again, I take the weather tibble, I pipe it to a mutate verb, and then I specify the variable I'd like to create or modify is change f, and then it's equal to that expression of max temp f minus min temp f. I'm going to save that result to the tibble weather, so it will overwrite my original tibble, adding a new variable to it. I'll run all of that and print out the result. And you can see in that printed out result, there is an additional column, change f, which is now the difference between maximum temperature and minimum temperature. Going back to look at my code, the expressions you use can be any valid R expression, including variable names that exist in your tibble. So in the second example, what I'm going to do is create two new variables, max temp C and min temp C, where I convert the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit to the temperature in degrees Celsius. Again, this is a mathematical formula where I take the value in the corresponding temperature variable, add 40, divide by 9, multiply by 5, and subtract 40. I can run this code and then print out the resulting tibble. Looking in the output window, you can now see there are two new columns, one of which isn't shown, but the max temp C column now has the temperature in degrees Celsius. So remember that you're going to use the mutate and the rename verbs whenever you would like to create or change variables in an existing data set.